Hoi,
Hola.
Ahoy.
Sveik.
Привіт.
Hallo.
Ciao.
Salut.
Hello.
And welcome to Policy Voices by Friends of Europe, an independent think tank with a difference. Each week from Brussels, we bring you powerful conversations with policy voices from around the world. Policy Voices talking policy choices.
I think it was very democratic. I know a lot of people are complaining, like we are the far right. We won the election, European elections. We deserve a place at the table and we need an appointment too, because that's what Viktor Orban and Giorgia Meloni were saying. I think it's crap. I think they should stop treating the EU as if it were the UN, that you can just fill with your political or national cronies. The more people you have in the system, the more influence you have. No, the EU, it's a democratic political system. It works like national democracies. Who won the elections? It was not the far right. So the big winner was the center right. So the center right tries to form the first coalition.
The decision by the heads of state and government to put forward these two names, Mr. Costa, they can choose for themselves who's running the club, but I don't see it as undemocratic, because this is the pure nature of the European Union and how democracy in the EU works. It's mainly on the level of the European Council where the big political decisions are taken, and this is merely one of them.
Hello and welcome to Policy Voices, Friends of Europe's weekly podcast on European and global affairs. I'm your host, Catarina Vila Nova. The curtain has finally been lifted on who will be the new leaders of the European Union. After months of speculation, the heads of government of the EU member states landed on three names: Ursula von der Leyen, Antonio Costa and Kaja Kallas. Von der Leyen will most likely stay on as the Commission President and will bring with her the still Estonian Prime Minister as the EU Foreign Policy Chief. That is, of course, once the new European Parliament votes on the new college. As for Costa, well, that's a done deal, and he will be replacing Charles Michel at the end of this year. My guests this week are Caroline de Gruyter, Europe correspondent at NRC, and Johannes Tralla, journalist at Estonian Public Broadcasting. I spoke with them earlier this week to dissect the new and not so new top jobs, including, of course, Rutte's confirmation as NATO Secretary General. Here's our conversation. Caroline and Johannes, thank you so much for joining me today at Policy Voices, and welcome. How are you both doing this afternoon?
Oh, I'm great. Enjoying the first day of my holiday. So greetings from my summer cottage in Estonia. It's raining and it's some thunder outside. So if you have any blackouts from my side, it's because I was hit by thunder, but hopefully that won't happen.
Hopefully not. Hopefully you'll be safe, not only for this interview, but for the rest of your holidays. Caroline, how are you?
I am fine too. I am just in Brussels, where for once it is not raining. On top of that, we had a great weekend here, so I'm totally fine.
So thank you so much to both of you for joining me this afternoon, as we're going to discuss the latest developments coming straight from the EU bubble. Ursula von der Leyen, Antonio Costa and Kaja Kallas. I believe there was no big surprises there. The names were being touted already for some time. But last week we had the confirmation, or the first confirmations, that indeed these will be the new trifecta. So for Ursula von der Leyen, Caroline, I believe indeed there were no surprises here. It was expected that she would indeed take a second mandate. So in your opinion, what can we expect of von der Leyen? Point two.
I think a lot of pragmatism, as we have seen so far. I think, frankly, because of all the hurdles that we've had in the past years, COVID and the war in Ukraine and everything else, I think the Commission's role is changing with her at the helm. And I think member states are rather, there's always lesser qualities to be found in her. And they see them, of course. But frankly, in all those years that I've been in and out of Brussels covering Europe, I've never heard so many diplomats from member states saying positive things about a president of the Commission. I've been here under Prodi, under Barroso, Juncker, very, very negative, always, because nobody ever gets everything they want. But with her, it is a little bit different. Because for the first time, I think they look at the Commission not just as a law-making machine, but also as a service provider. You want vaccines? I will give you vaccines. You want gas deliveries? I'll give you that. You want me to organize weapons for Ukraine? Okay, I will look into that as well. And, she's not questioning that a lot. They ask and she delivers. And she's not very theological about, who has the power in Europe, whether it's the Commission or the member states. I think they're both getting more power in a way. But she's very flexible in that kind of thing. So I think the member states look at von der Leyen as somebody who is, to them, delivering, which is not easy with 27 different geographies and cultures and political cultures and interests. So I think we will just see a lot more of that. And it's very à l'improviste, as the French sometimes say. So depending on, what member states are coming up with and what they think is necessary, she will try to give them that.
And Johannes, assuming that she will pass the hurdles in the parliament, do you agree with Caroline in terms of the second mandate? What can we expect?
Well, I think in general, I totally agree. I mean, I think Ursula von der Leyen has done a much better job during her first mandate than perhaps many were expecting. So it has been an extremely difficult period for Europe, and she has actually managed to keep Europe together, but also provide those necessary services indeed. So the big question now is, of course, whether there will be a shift from the green transition to something that will maybe increase the competitiveness of the EU or boost defense. Two promises that we heard before the elections in her campaign, and how can this be balanced with the challenges that the green transition will inevitably bring? And I'm sure Ursula von der Leyen will try to keep a good balance there and not to really turn back any of the big climate promises that were made and that are forged in law. So that will be an interesting spectacle for all following politics to see how she can balance those challenges for the next years to come, while keeping the Green Deal alive.
A spectacle is a great word to describe the situation in Brussels now and in the next months. And Caroline, before you were describing von der Leyen's attitude of, being a go-getter, and you specifically mentioned you want vaccines, I'll deliver the vaccines. However, she did get into some legal issues, specifically with vaccines. She's at the center of Pfizergate. And at the same time, Antonio Costa is coming, he was replacing Charles Michel as the council president. Is also being investigated in his home country of Portugal, where I'm from. So we have two of the top leaders, both being investigated with some, suspicions of corruption. What does this say about that? There was almost like no question that they would be nominated, and they were nominated despite everything that is going back there, Caroline?
First of all, I should say I'm not a news getter in the newsroom anymore, so I don't know too much about both cases. But when you take a few steps back, frankly, I understand that they're different. Frankly, I understand that the problem with von der Leyen is that she exchanged WhatsApp messages during the negotiations with one or several CEOs of the pharmaceutical company. I have no problem with that. Many people are unhappy with a lack, let's say, of democracy in Europe. But I don't think we should confound this with transparency. When you are in negotiation with several partners, she's in negotiation, she's in between, in a way, the member states 27 times, plus, because there are also non-EU European countries participating in this vaccine program. And then with a lot of pharmaceutical companies. I understand that you cannot do this just on the town square with everybody looking on and with every phase of the negotiation becoming public. So I am a little bit hesitant there. Is this really the big issue that we're facing? I don't think so. And I also don't think it is corruption. The second case, I know even less, but what I've understood about the Costa case is that there are several people who were in his cabinet who are investigated. And then the name Antonio Costa comes up. And so they searched his house and his office. And then it turns out that there was a confusion of names and they were actually after a different Antonio Costa. But then his name got entangled in it. He immediately resigned. Elections came, which is a proper way to go about this, waiting for his name to be cleared. Now, nobody knows how long this takes, but it's clear that the confusion was there. I think the prosecutor has admitted that they made a mistake. And, maybe he will be implicated for some other reason. But this Antonio Costa was apparently decidedly not him. So I'm not sure with both cases that we should make much of an issue of them.
You agree, Johannes, that, from what you were saying, Caroline, it's with von der Leyen, it's almost as the ends justify the means, I believe, especially in terms of crisis. We need vaccines, which he had to deliver. Do you agree, Johannes, that perhaps it's not so much of a big of a deal?
Well, as Caroline mentioned, the question is if you see it as a problem. Now, obviously, the heads of state who put her candidacy forward didn't see that as a problem. Obviously, EPP doesn't see that as a problem. Will the socialists see it in any different light? Well, the signals that I'm receiving currently, the Social Dems perhaps see flirting with ECR as a bigger issue than whatever discussions were going on in WhatsApp with the vaccines. So I do believe that this is an issue that will follow von der Leyen for as long as the institutions need to go through the meaningful processes of looking into and trying to establish some sort of transparency. But as a journalist, this common understanding that the European machinery or the process in Brussels is usually dragged down by bureaucracy and the solutions don't come when we need them. I think the majority of Europeans see this process of getting the deal done with the vaccines and continuing life in its normal path more important than full transparency with the conversations Ursula von der Leyen had with the vaccine producers. It's I don't sense this urgency, or I don't sense this issue as something that the Estonian MEPs would vote against Ursula von der Leyen for. It's not on their radar. It's not a terrible problem.
And I'm wondering, so in your own country, so Caroline in the Netherlands and Johannes from Estonia, to what extent do you think citizens are even aware that there are these legal issues, looming on top of two of the top leaders? Are they even aware? Do they even care?
Sorry, I would think 9 out of 10 people wouldn't know anything about that in Estonia when you ask.
Same in the Netherlands, maybe 10 out of 10 don't know. If they would know, they would, get up in arms and everything because... But in the Netherlands, they are, after 8 months of very difficult negotiations, they're about to install a new government, and people are gazing at the national navel at the moment, and they're not looking at Europe really. But perhaps if they would hear about it, they would say, yes, I've told you so, So in a way, it's also good that it's not such a big issue.
And a quick question to both of you, Caroline. First you, what do you think are the chances that von der Leyen will pass the hurdles of the parliament? Will she have to make uncomfortable deals?
Look, politics, especially with 27, is about making uncomfortable deals. There's no way around it. Internally, uncomfortable deals, and also externally, more and more. Because the world is becoming a rough place, and we cannot just, always be Mr. Nice Guys. And politics, you need to make choices between a rock and a hard place often. And, we are drifting more and more into this tough and turbulent world. So, yes.
Johannes, how uncomfortable do you think things will be?
Well, I think there's a scope of where Ursula von der Leyen will need to maneuver and will need to find the sweet spot to get a deal with all the players. I think the Grand Coalition will back her mostly, but the question is how many votes will she get from the Greens? Will she get any from ECR or not? So I think her gamble before the elections was to look for support from ECR, which perhaps will backfire with the Social Democrats, perhaps not. I'm following those events from Tallinn and from my summer cottage now, so I clearly don't have that fresh Brussels perspective, more reading news articles than actually being on spot and speaking to MEPs who, well, like me, are probably mostly enjoying their holiday these days. So it's difficult to see, but of course, as Caroline already said, politics is about those deals, and Ursula von der Leyen is dependent on what the heads of state wish and what the big political families in Europe have in mind for the mission. And I think the playground is well known for her, so I don't think there will be major surprises or major compromises that we will see.
And let's talk about Kaja Kallas. She has been chosen as the next EU foreign policy chief. This role is also known as HRVP, and even though a main center stage now as the HRVP is of course the war in Ukraine, the role is much broader than just this. And given that she's in Estonia, she's the Prime Minister of Estonia, of course, her main concern, because of geographical reasons, of course, is Russia and the war in Ukraine. But Caroline, do you then share other people's concerns that she's too focused on Russia and Ukraine, or do you think she will do a good job as HRVP overall?
I forgive her for being very focused on that because, damn it, it's a neighboring country. So, it's very easy to say from Brussels that she should not be that. Having said that, I think she's much smarter than that. I've met her a few times, and she strikes me as one of the best articulated heads of state and government, not afraid to make a very clear point, which is something special. She's not just a manager, as many of our, prime ministers and presidents are. I think she has more of a vision. At the same time, being high rep means that you don't have a lot of room for maneuver. She needs to be speaking on behalf of 27 who all want to go to do different things and want to follow different speeds and so on. So it will be hard, even for her, with her clear voice, to articulate all these different approaches very well. But I think she's one of the best placed to do this. Because for citizens, they have strong opinions usually on foreign policy. And what they get is a compromise of a compromise, which we all understand why it is. But that makes it extremely difficult for the high rep to translate this into comprehensible language. And I think she will be able to do that.
And Johannes, how were the news received in your country that Kallas would be leaving for Brussels?
Well, to start off with a bit of humor, it's of course a great relief to me and my colleagues because we don't have to ask what she will do when she gets the invitation to go to Brussels, and she doesn't have to answer that she's not going anywhere. That's been the ritual for the past 3-4 months, at least in Estonia. I've done quite a few interviews with her discussing the prospect of going to Brussels, and now it's clear she's going. And it's a huge thing. We haven't had a politician this influential in the international arena as her, probably well, never. People do try to compare her with Lennart Meri, the first president of Estonia after we regained independence in 91. But I think she's actually way more influential. And even though Estonians are proud about our nature and our IT and our digital state, I think we still have this sense of inferiority, the feeling that major decisions on the world stage are made without our real input. And I mean, we do have objective reason to believe that we're a nation just over 1.3 million. So we do feel that our ability to influence global affairs is limited. However, if Kaja Kallas were to become the high rep, it would perhaps also help to alleviate this complex. A small country with a talented prime minister who is very clear in drawing a line with where democracy and rule of law and freedom are threatened, and can actually really define those challenges that the war in Ukraine brings to all countries who want freedom and self-determination. I think this is one of her qualities that she has brought to the international arena, to talk about those things in a way where people actually understand why is Vladimir Putin a problem? Why is the war in Ukraine a problem? Not just for Ukraine, but for the international order. So it's fabulous news for Estonia. And I think it's also good news when we look at Estonian domestic politics, because even though Kaja Kallas is hugely popular in Europe and has an excellent reputation internationally, she has really had a hard time at home. Now, the perception that she has lost control of domestic politics has arisen swiftly despite her triumph in last year's parliamentary election, where her party won more seats than any other in Estonia's contemporary political history. She has faced pressure from both the opposition and the media.
Where does that come from then?
There are many reasons, of course, many which perhaps are not suitable to discuss in this format right now, but just to mark a few. Estonia has really seen a downturn of the economy for 3 consecutive years. She won the elections in a landslide victory with a campaign promise not to introduce any new taxes. The introduction of new taxes began 2 weeks after she won the election. So that's a very black and white kind of a situation. And also she has been scarred by a political scandal that emerged almost a year ago in August, where became apparent that her husband's company was actually continuing to do business with Russia even after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine had happened. So again, something that on the international arena has not been a big topic, and I'm quite sure will not be a major stumbling stone for her to get the top job. But in Estonia, this has raised questions of moral and ethics.
And what can we expect of Kaja Kallas as HRVP after having seen her as Prime Minister? How do you think she will take on this new role?
We will see. It's a great challenge. I mean, you already discussed the difficult art of compromises in the job, where you have 27 ministers of foreign affairs with very different interests that Kaja Kallas will have to navigate. One of her coalition partners in Estonia, the mayor of Tallinn, Jevgeni Ossinovski from the Social Democratic Party, recently said that Kaja Kallas is an excellent solo artist, but perhaps sometimes struggles as a team player or a team leader. Her abilities to shine rhetorically are perhaps sometimes stronger than really finding difficult compromises where her own approach may be downvoted. So again, a perception by one of her political competitors, perhaps, but there might be some truth in it. So I'm sure Kaja Kallas knows her strengths and weaknesses and will polish her ability to find those compromises. Anyway, she seems very motivated, and for Estonia, this opportunity to have our former prime minister by that time behind the table of G7 and G20, where we would never be because of our tiny size, I think is symbolic after this challenge that Russia has posed for the international order. We know how Europe was divided after the Second World War and how Estonia had to suffer for half a year of Soviet occupation. I think many will think these days that Kaja Kallas will do everything in her power for these kinds of deals to never happen again. So for Estonians, this is a big thing, and even her critics have accepted that she has done an excellent job on the international arena, even despite the internal politics of Estonia. They might have a different opinion.
I think it was one of her predecessors, Toomas Ilves, former politician, president. He once said, "It's been 20 years and you're still calling us the new countries. You know, bloody hell, stop doing this. Did you call Sweden and Austria, who became members in 95, 2 years later, still new countries? No, you did not, And for me, I've seen European politics changing a lot since the Russian invasion in Ukraine. And one of the nicer elements, so I've lived in Central Europe as well, where they've always felt a little bit, they're not hearing us. It's the old Western Europeans who are calling the shots and so on. It's really changed. And we have perhaps to thank Vladimir Putin for it. But, you people in Central and Eastern Europe have been warning us. You've told us so, and we chose not to listen. And now you're frontline states in a way, dealing with the border problem, with refugees, with difficult transports. And all of a sudden, in Brussels here, you notice that there are initiatives coming from, the Baltic states, from other Central European states, and the north of Europe is also coming closer to the center. And it's a development. We always look at negative things at the moment, but this is, in my view, one of the positive outcomes of the war and the transformation of European politics as a result. And her appointment, if she gets it, to me is a symbol of that.
Yep, I do have to agree. And I mean, it would be quite strange if someone referred to Germany as the former Nazi state. For some reason, it is still okay to talk about the Baltic states as the former Soviet republic. So maybe something that should change in addition to calling us the new European countries.
Indeed, I can't imagine what it must feel like, given the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, to still be referred to that, to still having that history so present and still being referred to with that attachment to the Soviet Union. It must be aggravating, to say the least. I want to turn now to the process, how the bubble managed to come up with these three names, and how this deal was cooked before the UCO meeting last Thursday and Friday. So as we all know, there were 6 negotiators, all men: the Greek Prime Minister and the Polish Minister for the EPP, the Spanish Prime Minister and the German Chancellor for the Socialists, and then French President Emmanuel Macron, who had a terrible weekend, we say by passing, but it's not the focus of today's episode, and the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte for the Liberals, who decided on these 3 names. And Caroline, I know you have a very strong opinion about this. How democratic or undemocratic do you think this process was?
I think it was very democratic. I know a lot of people are complaining, like we are the far right. We won the election, the European elections. So we deserve a place at the table, and we need an appointment too. Because that's what Viktor Orban and Giorgia Meloni were saying. I think it's crap. I think they should stop treating the EU as if it were the UN, that you can just fill with your political or national cronies. The more people you have in the system, the more influence you have. No, the EU is a political system. It's a democratic political system. It works like national democracies. Take my country. We've just spent 8 months negotiating with 4 political parties who all want different stuff for a new government. And those parties actually managed. The one who won the elections is far-right leader Geert Wilders. Well, he's not my type. But still, he won the elections. His party came first. So it was his turn first to start building a coalition, and he managed. So now they are appointing their own ministers, I cannot fully understand that the rest of the political spectrum, so the political center and the left, are very unhappy with this. I mean, I'm personally also very unhappy with it. But you cannot say it's undemocratic. The same thing has happened on the European level now. Who won the elections? It was not the far right. The far right actually lost in a lot of Northern European and Central European countries. We all look at France and Germany, but that's not the whole story. So the big winner was the center right. So the center right tries to form the first, coalition. And it did so with the Social Democrats, who are still the second political family in Europe. And the Liberals, okay, they've lost a bit, so probably they can be more influenced easier, and they have a majority, so they are appointing, their government in a way. I think it is perfectly democratic, and I think it's time that also those who are perhaps impatient and are unhappy because they didn't win big enough, accept the outcome of it. Let them win. I hope it doesn't happen, but let them win more votes next time, so that they are the big winners, and then they can appoint their top jobs. It is exactly what is happening on the national level, and we should finally accept.
Well, Johannes, what you think about the process? Do you agree that this comparison between what happened at European level, that is equipped, it can be compared to what happens at national level when top parties that come in first get to be the ones to lead the negotiations?
Europe has tried to get the top names of the Commission in several ways. The Spitzenkandidat procedure failed. It is quite clear that the European Union is more than anything else a club for governments now. So those governments come together in Brussels with heads of states and prime ministers and decide who will be the European government, who will the Commission chief be. And so I don't really see a problem. This is how the machine has worked in the past and will probably work in the future, even if the European Parliament would like to get more power in the European elections. The balance will always be between the heads of state and government who are currently in power in their member states. The European Parliament will be there to fight for a compromise. But again, overall, I think right now the power balance is still working between the European Council and between the European Parliament. This huge populist revolution that we were warned about for months didn't happen. So I think the decision by the heads of state and government to put forward these, 2 names, actually. The third one, Mr. Costa, they can choose for themselves. I believe the European Parliament will not have a say on that, who's running the club and their talks in the European Council. So I believe this will go through. Eventually, there might be a bit of power play in the European Parliament, but I don't see it as undemocratic, because this is the pure nature of the European Union and how democracy in the EU works. It's mainly on the level of the European Council where the big political decisions are taken, and this is merely one of them.
And of course, we couldn't finish an episode on top jobs without talking about the other top job that was filled recently. I'm talking, of course, NATO, Mark Rutte. Johannes, I'll start with you, and I'll ask, I want to know, I'm curious to know how was this news received in your corner of Europe?
The Estonian government actually for months couldn't decide whether to support Rutte or not. And we've been asking this question for quite some time. Was there a reason? Was the reason behind that the fact that Kaja Kallas wanted the job for herself or not? This is a bit unclear. I mean, she clearly had ambition at a certain point, even though she never openly accepted this. But there was this understanding that the job should go to someone from Central or Eastern Europe, because historically our part of Europe has missed out in those posts. Eventually, Estonia supported Mark Rutte, and the perception largely in Estonia is that, well, he's a man who can navigate difficult compromises on the political arena. The amount of parties in the Dutch parliament is, well, impressive by all standards. So he clearly knows how to run the show, and I believe the Dutch approach to Russia and Rutte's approach to Russia is something that we in Estonia don't have a problem with. We can relate to that, and Rutte can relate to our concerns. And as Estonia has been run by a liberal prime minister for, I guess I could say most of our 30 plus years of independence after the Soviet occupation, I'm sure the liberals in their club have good relationships. Both our two biggest parties belong to the liberal family. They know each other well, and our former Prime Minister and former European Commission Vice President Andrus Ansip has given a few emotional comments about how Rutte can manage things on the international arena. So it seems our political elite is happy with him, and I don't see a reason why not to join them.
Indeed, good news for the Liberals. And Caroline, how was the news received that your Prime Minister would vacate his post and you would move on to NATO to be the SecGen? And after seeing him as the Prime Minister for over a decade, 14 years in power, I believe, right? What can we expect of him as NATO SecGen?
Somebody who is profoundly transatlantic. Rutte is somebody who doesn't really have a vision, in my view. I mean, I've seen him operating. He's been ruling with the right and with the left and with the center and everybody else. He is extremely flexible. But I think there's one element in he loves American politics. He devours political biographies of past American presidents, for example. He is even more a transatlanticist, I think, than a European, although he's grown on the European stage in the past couple of years through all the crises. So there he will be. I mean, the NATO is about consensus. It's about keeping a balance between the Americans and between the Europeans, which are also, they come in different tastes, as we all know. So he is a person right in the middle of the bridge in a way. So I think that would be good. Second, he's had, because of the MH17, the plane full of Dutch and some other nationals that was shot out of the air over eastern Ukraine in 2014. He's been dealing with Putin over that. So he knows the guy a little bit. He knows what he's up to. He's been lied to like 15 times a day. The total lack of cooperation that he has gotten from the Russians and their cronies in eastern Ukraine. I mean, I think he knows what we can still expect from that side. Now to the Dutch, he's led 4 governments, and I think many Dutch, even though some of them are very unhappy with the new far-right government, far-right, they're in a way happy to see him go. Because, there's a time for everything, and he perhaps should have left a bit earlier. Yeah. Because the man is so pragmatic that many problems have arisen that he sort of, he's managed his way through instead of really solving them. Now, perhaps somebody else would not have been able to solve them either, but some of these problems keep popping up, and he still tries to manage them away. And I think many citizens, they've just had it with that. So they think it's time for him to go. And so they're perhaps, it's a little bit similar of the story with Kaja Kallas in Estonia. It's like, are you going to campaign for yourself in Brussels? No. I have different appointments and all that. We've had this game with Rutte for, even longer, I would say, for 1.5 years. Because already 1.5 years ago, I heard for the first time from here and there in Brussels that, we've asked your prime minister for NATO and he doesn't want to, and why? And so, he's been preparing for this for a long time, and many people have sort of smelled it and felt it and seen it. So now, his time is up.
It will be indeed interesting times ahead in Brussels, both in the EU, but in NATO, as the new leaders take on the new jobs until the end of the year. We have a lot to discuss in the coming months, but for now, thank you so much, Caroline and Johannes, for being with me this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation.
Thank you for staying on that side and listening to my conversation with Caroline de Gruyter, Europe correspondent at NRC, and Johannes Tralla, journalist at Estonian Public Broadcasting. If you want to comment on this episode, you can search for Friends of Europe on LinkedIn and X, or send us an email. Our address is press@friendsofeurope.org. As always, don't forget to subscribe to Friends of Europe's podcast wherever you get your podcasts to never miss an episode of Policy Voices. I'm Catarina Vila Nova, and I'll be with you again next week. Until then, goodbye.